Well, it is decided. Jorge Martin is the 2024 MotoGP World Champion. Welcome back to the Crash MotoGP podcast. I am joined by Pete McLaren and Lewis Duncan as ever. And Pete, we'll just start straight with you. It's decided now. Jorge Martin has achieved his dream. He is now world champion. He had to wait till Sunday for it, the last Grand Prix, but he was he was cool and calm today, I thought, getting the job done.
That's it, yeah. He did what he needed to do, didn't he? You know, at the end of a long season, 20 Grand Prix and 40 races, it comes down to just 10 points, doesn't it? But really, it wasn't quite that close, was it? You know, we'll look back on paper and go, wow. But really, he just had to not make any big mistakes, did he, this weekend? I mean, both of them did what they needed to do. Pecco had to win both races. He did that. Martin just had to not make any mistakes, bring the bike home. And he's got it done. So, yeah, a little bit of history with the first satellite champion, if you like, of the MotoGP era. And I think it would have taken major drama, wouldn't it, to have upset things and turned things around. Of course, it had been a season with a lot of big dramatic moments for the title leaders, but I think it kind of felt appropriate, didn't it? I mean, Pecco won his 11th Grand Prix of the year. You know, that's a massive number of races to win, but ultimately Martin did what he needed to do to be a champion. You know, he had that consistency to match the speed. And he joins those lists. He's the fifth, I think, Spanish champion, isn't he, in the Premier class? So, and most of those have come in the last couple of decades, haven't they? So, he joins an illustrious list of names, and takes that number one plate to Aprilia now. We imagine. Yeah,
well, he didn't actually confirm anything in his champions press conference, but I mean, he stuck the one on the Pramac. It looked pretty good, so I think it would look pretty good on the Aprilia as well. As you can see, if you're watching, Lewis is in the media centre at Barcelona. Lewis, what was the reaction like when Martin done? Obviously, Spanish rider at home. It was a pretty big moment for him, wasn't it? You could see the emotion.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we haven't had a Spanish world champion for a few years now. Joan Mir was the last one, and it's funny to say that, given how dominant Spain has been in the MotoGP class for the last 10, 15 years, really, going all the way back to sort of Jorge Lorenzo. It was an odd one. I think it's been an odd weekend all in all. Everyone's been here and it's been busy like a championship decider, but obviously we're meant to be in Valencia before obviously the horrible floods happened there. And it's just felt a bit strange. Like, it has just felt a little bit off, the atmosphere. People have been excited about it, but yeah, it's been a very strange one. But Martin winning the championship was received very well here. The fans loved it. I thought his celebrations were cool. They were cheesy, but they were great. I thought it was cool. And the atmosphere in the paddock now, the Ducati team, the factory team are a bit, I've heard some celebrations coming from the garage, but I think there's definitely a tinge of disappointment, regret as well. And then obviously the Pramac boys have been absolutely going for it. Aprilia have been going for it with the Lace retired. There's a lot of quite nice sort of storylines here, but yeah, I think with everything that's gone on with why we're here, the racing for Valencia stuff, I think it's given the championship for Martin just that little bit more of a special feeling.
Yeah, we'll just get straight into the race, actually, because it wasn't a classic at all. It wasn't actually what I thought it would be. Pete, it was very, I don't know, it's just very straightforward. It was, Martin just kind of sat there. He got overtaken by Marc Marquez, of course, who finished second, and Marquez and Bagnaia just disappeared from him, really, and he just sat there. And we can discuss what Enea Bastianini thinks of Alicia Spargaro's tactics in that race, but it was fairly easy for him. But in that type of easy situation, as we've heard them both say this year, Martin and Bagnaia, when you relax, that's when you make mistakes, and they had to keep their concentration. Well, especially Martin did, but he handled it really well, considering after yesterday's sprint.
He did, yeah. It looked like almost the most tense moment was before the race decided on the tyres, wasn't it? Because there were sort of three viable rear tyre options. And I think Michelin said last night they expected that most people would go, the favoured option, I think they said, was the hard. And it turned out Bagnaia, Marquez, they won two on the soft. So, Martin went for the middle option, didn't he? He kind of played it safe. We didn't know. He's been kind of saying that when in these kind of decision situations he should just sort of copy Pecco. Yeah. Well, in this situation he didn't, did he? He did sort of stick to his guns and say, let's go with the conservative option here, the middle range, literally the medium. But there certainly were some last minute discussions on the grid there. But as you say, Jordan, with that range of rear tyres, you would think that things would have been a bit more shaken up, wouldn't you, during the race? That one tyre would, the hard would have come in at the end and people would have come through the field, or the soft would have dropped back a lot. But actually, it was all sort of, things settled down. And as you say, a few passes back and forth for the positions at the lower end of the top six. Also the KTM guys, that was another place decided, wasn't it? Bastianini and Marquez were obviously battling over third. Acosta and Binder over fifth and best non-Ducati. And Binder, I mean, what a race for him, I guess. Yet again, if we're talking about a lack of overtaking, he's the guy that is the exception, isn't it? For 18th on the grid?
Yeah.
So another great recovery by Binder that just whips away that fifth place from Acosta, who I think he might have had some brake problems or something, didn't he, as well? But still, either way, for Binder, that was a great recovery. But certainly at the front of the field, which was where we were all focusing, for obvious reasons, it was all a bit static, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I felt like the drama almost came yesterday a bit, and today it was a bit more easier for Martin Lewis. But the talking point, I think, from this race is really the Aleix Espargaro and Bastianini stuff. Obviously, we know the relationship that Jorge and Aleix Espargaro have. They're like more than best friends, it seems, and Aleix took real pride in helping him out this weekend. He made no secret about it. And Bastianini wasn't really happy with the tactics, but there's also been some spicy comments put back towards Bastianini from Aleix in this regard, hasn't there?
Yeah, well, Aleix referred to this as a 10 out of 10 weekend for him, the best way for him to end his career. He was competitive, he did it on home soil, and he helped his mate, win a championship. He calls him his son. That's how close that relationship is between Aleix and Jorge Martin. I think they're neighbours, or they're very close to being neighbours in Andorra. Aleix has really taken Jorge under his wing over the past couple of years, and you definitely saw at the start of this Grand Prix, Aleix he was racing for Jorge, he wasn't racing for himself. And I thought the move on Bastianini was great at turn 5, and he did what he did what he thought he could do, and I don't really think Bastianini can get all that oiky about it. That's racing, if he was faster than him, go make a move stick. And as it turned out, Bastianini wasn't that competitive in this Grand Prix. If he feels if he could have gotten ahead of Aleix, then maybe he could have gone after Jorge and gone after Marc. But as we saw the kind of the dive towards the end of the race and how beaten up Bastianini got, I don't really think that was ever really realistic. So Bastianini can be annoyed. He's annoyed. He wanted third in the championship. He said on Thursday, it's really important for me. Marc Marquez has said that, it's zero difference to me. I don't care. And and you could see the disappointment on Anea's face when he came for his debrief today, just on the table opposite where I'm recording this podcast right now. He was disappointed. But I think that's racing, and it's kind of just been what Anea's season has been. It's been, promised a lot and not really delivered.
Yeah, it's a strange one because he got that fantastic podium yesterday, Pete, in the sprint. I mean, the start he made, Anea, he went from 8th to 1st in the first corner. It was outstanding, and that was his 7th sprint podium in a row, considering he never actually had one until Silverstone. He was I was surprised, man. He made a good start again today, but his race and his season, as Lewis says, it's a story of what maybe could have been. There's a lot left on the table, I think, from Anea at times, and I think today kind of summed that up, didn't it?
I think it did, and you also have to wonder, is part of the disappointment at losing this third place coming down to what happened at this race in May? When he chose not to do those long laps, and he lost because he's missed it by 6 points.
Yeah.
He could well have got those in May, couldn't he? If he'd have just served the penalty, which even though he didn't feel was correct, but if he just served it straight away, and instead he got that massive, was it 30-second or something? 30 seconds.
Yeah, it was huge.
Post-race penalty. Yeah, it was huge because he missed that many penalties during the race. Anyway, whether that's part of it, because he does realise that's come back and bit him quite badly at the end of the standings, I don't know. The situation with Aleix, I mean, I suppose potentially looking at it, that the role that Aleix played there, you could say, well, did it really make a difference? But at that moment of the race, did maybe if Martin was going to be ruffled up, maybe just having Aleix there seeing it on his pitboard, who knows? So it might have been more important than perhaps it looked, but I don't think Bastianini can really sort of blame Aleix for riding for whoever. I mean, Martin is going to be in a prettier rider next year, as well as being friends. They have a vested interest. The team has a vested interest in Martin being world champion. Let's face it as well. So it's what normally happens in title deciders, isn't it? We've spoken about this on our previous podcast that teammates come into it and other people on the same brand and other other people, friends, everything else. That's a normal situation in a title decider, and that's what spices them up. Today, that was the only bit that we saw of that, wasn't it? And let's face it, as you said, John, that was probably why it's become sort of the focus of the action, because actually, Bagnaia, he stuck to his guns. He didn't mess around, did he? He said, look, I'm just going to go and win. And he did that. So, he has his principles, he sticks to them. And so we didn't see any kind of sort of tactics from his side. But yeah, clearly we did from Aleix.
Lewis, you want to comment any further on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we will end up looking back on the kind of that Aleix help in the start of the race as being quite important, because if you look at that group, that was quite a tight group behind Martin, and with Pecco winning the race, if Martin slipped out of the top 9, that was it. That was game over. And we saw Pedro Acosta was well inside the top 6, and as Pete said, he had some brake problems. Mm-hmm. He ended up dropping outside the top 10, and we saw some guys roughing up there. Franco Morbidelli wanted to go out and get a good result for himself. Alex Marquez wanted to go out and get a good result for himself, and those guys were really feisty. You had Brad Binder looking to just, get what he could from it. You had Bez up there trying to just have a good... There was a lot of guys there that could have caused a lot of problems for Martin, and I think those, sort of, was a laps 3 to 5 where Enea and Aleix really had a good ding-dong with each other was quite pivotal in the end. I think Martin looked uncomfortable. He was riding within his limits, but he didn't look. We saw him in the pre-race. He wasn't on the grid at all. He was in the garage the whole time, which was sensible in my opinion. You don't want hangers on coming up to you and patting you on the back and try to talk to you and cameras in your face, and you don't want to maybe overhear a comment about pressure, nerves, blah 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 blah. But we saw he was nervous. He said in the sprint race he was nervous. I think that the race could have gone a bit worse for Jorge had it not been for Aleix.
Yeah, well, it all works out fine now because of course he's sitting there world champion, and we'll talk about Pecco Bagnaia shortly. But I want to talk about Jorge Martin, Pete. I think I watched the press conference that he done, and there's some great quotes in there about how he's changed and how he changed his mentality this year, working with a coach to help him mentally and overcoming last year. And he said something that I was really put in perspective how clearly he thinks. He says, well, last year I lost, but I'm still here, so what's the worst that can happen? I can try again, sort of thing. And he said that I've completed the perfect circle now. Essentially, I could stop tomorrow. Essentially, I've done everything I wanted to do in motorbikes, but his mentality this year has been the shining light, and I think it's won him his world title. Obviously, the less mistakes, the consistency, the openness to talk about how he feels. I think it's really refreshing, isn't it, for someone that is the top of their game now. He's the best rider in the world to share that with people.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it's rare to see that sort of vulnerability sort of just opened up and put out there. And, it was a massive blow for him last year, wasn't it? We saw him in tears, literally. This time it was tears of joy. It was tears of sort of, obviously, disappointment, dejection, everything. Felt like he'd let the team down, didn't he? Everything else, the complete opposite of this weekend, where he's saying, probably this means more to the team than for me, because as you say, he sort of worked on his mental approach and sort of realize that, look, nobody's going to die if I don't win, wasn't it? It's focus on what you hope will happen, but don't be sort of too worried about what doesn't happen. And stuck to what he could control. And but at the same time, he has been open, as Lewis was saying, about being nervous, not wanting to eat yesterday at lunchtime and all that kind of thing. So he has, which is unusual because normally riders try and look bulletproof, don't they? That's the thing, especially in a title decider, they don't want to give away anything. So normally you get these, oh no, I'm absolutely fine, everything's normal, and everything else, and he's been quite different to that. But he's just showing that maturity and how much he's changed in a year. That experience of fighting for a title, and it could have broken him, couldn't it, last year, losing at the last moment as a satellite rider, and everything else, and it didn't. He came back, and he's got the job done. So excited to see where he goes from here. Only 26 years old, big future in front of him, as you said. He and Pecco, they both have a lot of years left.
Yeah, they do, and I shared a graphic on social media for anyone listening. If you want to check it out, people forget that he had that massive crash at Portimao in 21, and it could have ended his career. There were horrific injuries. I think he missed maybe 5 or 6 rounds at that point, and he had to come back. It was his first year. And he was a rookie. I remember getting pole position. I think it was one of the first Qatar races, and you could see the joy that he had, and you thought, well, he's going to be special. He's quick. And then he comes back, and a few races after his injury, he comes back and he wins that first race in Austria, and he struggled in 22. He missed out on the Factory Ducati seat, the Bastianini, then for the 23-24 season. He misses out again this year to Marc Marquez.
That's it.
And
yeah.
now, Lewis, he's going to Aprilia as world champion, and he said that maybe it wasn't his place to be at Ducati in that press conference, which I thought was really interesting to hear for him to be so open like that. And it seems that he's accepted the decision, obviously, and he's looking forward to his next journey with Aprilia.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to kind of try and get a bit of a rise out of him on Thursday in the press conference, asking him, with the situation with Ducati, do you feel a bit sad about this? They've said you're kind of not good enough to be at the factory team, and yet here you are. You're the guy who's about to win the world championship, and he kind of brushed off and said, I don't think Ducati don't think I'm good enough. But 12 months ago, I asked him the same thing after losing the championship, because if you remember back then, if he won the championship, he was going to be promoted to the factory team.
Yeah.
And he said, look, if I haven't done enough to prove myself now, I'm never going to do it. And that was before he'd won the world championship. So I think he's had to accept it, really, because ultimately, I think there will still be this just little bit of niggling kind of thing in the back of his head that he's the world champion, and Ducati have still said, we want someone else. That's tough. That's going to be tough to take. But him talking about, I struggled with my mental health and I worked with a psychologist and stuff like that shows, we've spoken about how we've thought he seemed more mature this year, and that's borne itself out on track. And I think the way he's handled this situation as well, he knows he's going into a difficult prospect with Aprilia. This is not an easy, he's not going to jump on the RSGP and be quick straight away. But I think the Martin of last year would not have been able to cope with that situation in the way that this one clearly seems to be. And I think Martin deserves a lot of credit for that. I think he has... I think now was the right time for him to be world champion. I think for a number of reasons, from a personal side, from a sporting side as well. I just think he is a much, much better rider and person this year.
Yeah, for me, it makes the story way more complete that he done it this year, Pete. Like, as you've said, obviously, maybe last year could have been his only chance. You get so close and you never think, maybe I'm never going to get it again. And
that's it. Yeah.
It's a nice story, because he mentioned that you only ever want to do it with Pramac in this situation on the Ducati side. He's only the third Ducati world champion, Casey Stoner, Pecco Bagnaia, both in the factory team, obviously. And he's the one that you look at now in the history books. He'll be Jorge Martin, world champion with Pramac racing on an independent team on the same bike, of course, but it means a lot, doesn't it? It'll mean a real sense of pride for him, because they did give him, well, it's the only team he's ever been with in MotoGP up until this point, and it'll mean a lot, because especially as the third last race of Ducati too.
That's right. Yes, I think that he was thanking Ducati a lot today, wasn't he? And I think we do have to sort of acknowledge that they did give him equal support right to the end. We weren't sure, were we? And I think he says sort of everyone in this room wasn't sure if they would, but they did ultimately, and they gave him what he needed to win, and then he took that equipment and he won with it. So he was praising them for that. And I think, as Lewis says, I think he's absolutely right there with the whole mental coach thing. I think that's how they've taught him to sort of, what's the best way to view this rejection, if you like. And he's come to it as, he's come to terms with it, and he's seeing it as, well, it means that I stay with Pramac, I win the title with Pramac, and then I do something else, and that's fine, and it's just okay, and he moves on, and he's not carrying that baggage of that rejection with him, is he? That's sort of how it feels, and he's just using it all as a strength. But I mean, coming from Ducati's side, I think it's got to be painful, hasn't it?
Yeah,
it's got to be painful, no matter how. I mean, they'll obviously have a big PR job here to dress this up. Yes, he's a Ducati world champion. It'll say Jorge Martin Ducati, but they're letting this guy go, and that's to a rival. From the same country. I mean, they're two big brands, two big rivals. Gigi, of course, came from Aprilia.
Yeah.
And now the number one plate is going from Ducati to Aprilia. So however this is dressed up, it's going to be a bit painful, isn't it, I think, for them.
Yeah. Lewis, what do you think about that? The next few months, they will yeah, that'll be painful for Ducati, won't it?
Yeah, 100%. I spoke to Davide Tardozzi, the team manager, after, a couple of, about an hour ago now from when we were recording this, and I kind of asked him, is there a bit of regret there now? And he said to me, look, we were forced to make some. Sorry about the noise, by the way. Some food bags have been put out. So the paddock's very excited, maybe more excited than that than they were from the championship. I mean, if anyone's been to the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalonia, they know that the food situation can be a little bit not great. But yeah, I spoke to Tardozzi and he said, look, we were forced into making these hard decisions, and it ultimately meant we lost Jorge, we lost Pramac. They know that the decision came from higher up. People like Tardozzi, people like Delinia. I think really, if you in the fullness of time, we'll probably come to admit they wanted Jorge. He's done the job. The decisions obviously come from above their heads. We 100%, were they right to promote Marc Marquez and make sure they didn't lose him from the Ducati stable? Yes, that's. Look at what he did in the Grand Prix on a GP23 that was not in the sprint. He said P6 from a maximum. Today he was fighting for the win. Ducati made the right decision, but this is going to sting, and they're going to have to accept that. And Tardozzi's started a little bit of that kind of, putting the fires out, saying, look, Ducati Factory are the real champions. Jorge Martin, it says in the record books, he's Ducati. We gave him equal machinery. The top four in the championship are Ducati. It is a Ducati championship, and that's how they're going to dress it up over the next, couple of months, really. And yeah, as Pete says, though, it's tough for them, and they are just going to have to sit there and take it on the chin.
Yeah, they really are, aren't they, Pete? And come on to Pecco Bagnaia. I mean, to lose the world title by 10 points in the end, 11 Grand Prix wins overall. I think it was it 18 wins if you include the sprints as well. And you're thinking like that. There's nothing more else you could do, really. But it comes down to Pecco. He took it really well on the chin today, and he was gracious in defeat. And really nice shots of him watching Martin on the podium as he was spraying the champagne. He was standing at the side and he was kind of smiling, watching him. And it shows that they kind of grew up with each other in the paddock, and they were teammates in Moto3, and the relationship isn't the same now. But they're both stood there as MotoGP World Champions now. And if you'd had told them in 2015, for example, you're both going to be world champions one day, they would have easily took that. But yeah, it's going to be tough for Bagnaia, isn't it? Because he probably won't be able to accept it for, I don't know how long, a week, a month. It'll be tough, won't it?
Yeah, it's bound to be, isn't it? As you say, when you win that many races, you think you would automatically be world champion almost. But, maybe this is it. We are in this new sprint era where different point system, everything else, maybe this championship will be seen as almost a template or a warning for the future where people go, look, just winning is not enough.
Yep.
And, the old rules of, obviously, if you won this many Grand Prix under the previous rules, 11 out of probably 19, 20 races, you would have been world champion. But with the sprint races, everything else, it has changed things. And Bagnaia, as you say, everything you said about Bagnaia, the way he's handled the whole situation, the disappointment, I mean, it's been exemplary. And it was great to see him staying around with Jorge and looking genuinely pleased for Jorge Martin, wasn't he? Saying things like, if I can't win it, then I'm really happy he can. Yeah. And, great from Pecco today. But certainly, yeah, he's... Well, actually, it was interesting also when he brought up that sentence in the press conference about, Marc won his first two championships and then he lost the third, and then he came back and he won, so he's already thinking about, well, other people have been through this, other great champions have been through this sort of loss in their third year, if you like, not quite getting three in a row. So, there's plenty of opportunities ahead, and I'm sure that's the case. And he's already, isn't he, starting to look back at what he can do better, where the mistakes came, why, analysing the different kinds of mistakes, wasn't it? Talking about, is it when I back off and I lose the front because it's pushing the front? Also, sort of acknowledging that those tangles he had with other riders this year, I think it was 3 times, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Those are things that he needs to sort of remove, let's say, in future, because you can't win a championship that way, clearly.
Yeah, it was actually really open from him. He actually mentioned Lewis the Portimao clash, I think, and it was the... He kind of said that maybe I should have been a bit more patient there with Marquez and Portimao, and it was a real admission of like the season's ended now, and he's kind of said, well, maybe I should have done this. He's looking back at the mistakes and mentions the one from Malaysia that ultimately in his head he thinks he accepted it. He wasn't probably going to win the championship, but yeah, but Bagnaia can hold his head really high. I think in the modern MotoGP era, there's only Marquez and Rossi that have won more races than him in a season. Well, Marquez has won 12 in 2019. Was it 13 in 2014? And Rossi's won, I think, 11 one season too. So Bagnaia is right up there with the greats essentially of the sport and what he's done this year. But losing it, Lewis, it'll hurt, won't it?
Yeah, but I think Pecco can really be proud of himself, and I think Ducati can be proud of Pecco, and I think I think now, when we look back in 10, 15 years' time, we look back over world champions, Bagnaia, is he going to be remembered as one of the most popular? Probably not, but I think we do need to remember him as one of the greats, because what he's achieved on track has been excellent. It's because of, a large part because of him, that Ducati is in the dominant state that it is now. And if you look at the level that he's been at this year, along with Martin, it does say a lot. And I think also as well, the way he's represented MotoGP, the way he's represented Ducati, the way he's embodied everything that a world champion should be. The way he speaks, the way he spoke today, he jumped off the bike, and obviously he's disappointed. He did everything he could this weekend, pole, sprint, winning the Grand Prix. Like he could do nothing more, and he got off the bike and was like, "Look, I'm not going to talk about this. This is Jorge's day. Let him enjoy it." I did it thanks to my team, but I'm not taking the spotlight off of Jorge, and I think that says a lot. I think yes, there are mistakes there. Those 8 DNFs are not good enough, and those tangles, we spoke about them on the podcast before, is that really, if you actually kind of look at them and analyse them, Pecco is the one that can make the difference in all of them. Portimao with Marquez, Aragon with Alex Marquez. He could have been the one there to just change those things a little bit. He won't make those mistakes again next year, I don't believe. I think we will see a different... We're going to have to see a different Pecco, because he's going up against Marc Marquez, but... Yeah, but before we get to that point, I think reflecting on Pecco's reign as a double world champion, I think really he has been one of the better ones in this modern era, and I think he can go to bed tonight and just be proud of the job he's done, and proud of himself for the rider he's become as well. I think this has been a really good couple of years for him in terms of growth.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think out of the sort of new generation of riders that we've seen come up, I don't like to put a time stamp, maybe from 2019 onwards, I think he's the best out of the pack, to be honest. I mean, his stats are way clear of anyone else from that era of new riders. Yeah, of course, Martin showed today, and Pecco mentioned it, that Martin this season knew when to settle for second, and that is consistency has done it. And Bagnaia says he'll have to learn how to do that, and I think he will. Because, as you mentioned, Lewis, going up against Marc Marquez it'll be the biggest challenge of Bagnaia's career, no doubt, I think. And say, for example, next year he can beat Marquez as his teammate. If that, Bagnaia's status as a rider will go through the roof then if he does that. And I think he has the capability to do it. It's just, it'll be tough for him. I hope he bounces back. I hope this isn't the best that we ever see of him, because I think he can be even better. And if he can iron out those DNFs, he'll be a force next year, because that is his team at Ducati still. I feel they believed in him after everything with Dovizioso. They changed their direction, focused on the younger riders, and he's the one that's brought them world titles. So yeah, I think Bagnaia can hold himself very high about how he's been this year. And yeah, to talk about his future teammate now going ahead, Marc Marquez, Pete, third in the World Championship, second in the Grand Prix today. A nice way to end his season with Gresini. It's one that I'm quite sad about. I love this attitude that he's had, the fun that he's brought to how he's been throughout the year. And yeah, he has a new challenge now going into Ducati, which will be different for him again. But how do you think he can look back on his season, Marquez?
Yeah, I think reborn was the word he used, wasn't it, today, yet again? And I think that probably sums it up, doesn't it? He came into this year not really knowing what sort of a future he had in this sport. And, he knows very much that he's still at the top of his game. Maybe not at the absolute top, physically, certainly not, after all his arm operations. But he knows he can still beat the very best on his day. And, the difference between himself and the other guys on the GP23 this year has just been huge, isn't it? I think only one other podium, is it? I think Bezzecchi.
Two. So
was it-
Alex at Sachsenring and Bezzecchi at Jerez.
Right.
All, the 22 GP23 podiums. Marquez has 20 of them. So yeah, that
Right,
says
yeah,
everything,
yeah.
doesn't it?
That's it. I think that's that sums up his season and sums up that he's still got something special as a rider, doesn't it? And we can also talk about, well, he's going to the factory team. Actually, I think we raised it in the previous podcast. If he'd have gone there with Pecco as a triple world champion, it would have made things a little bit harder. So,
Yeah,
he
definitely.
didn't get involved clearly in the title fight today, but you could say that the way the circumstances have worked out, it's not so bad for him. And we'll see him on the GP, I guess the 24 and the 25 on Tuesday at the test, won't we? So and with his new crew chief and everything else, so we'll see how quickly he settles in. Certainly, though, the expectation will be sky high, won't it? After the way he's finished this year, and of course coming into this weekend saying it's going to be difficult. Top 5 would be nice. And then he goes and finishes second, and was only 1.4 seconds behind, wasn't he, on a year-old bike? So that it's the perfect springboard to go into the factory team with, I think.
Yeah, it is. And Lewis, he said, I think it was to Dorna in the TV sets. He said that he asked Michele Massini yesterday. He's like, so if I finish third, is that good for a satellite team? And they said, well, it might bring a little bit of extra bonus and money. And he's like, okay. So you can see today, as Pete said, yesterday he didn't look great, and when it came down to it today, he just he took advantage of maybe the nervousness of Martin, and he stuck with Bagnaia for pretty much all that race, and he will take a lot of confidence from this year, that knowing that he made the right choice leaving Honda. And he look at the year he's had, and look at the atmosphere that he built at Gresini. It's been really refreshing, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, you look at, this time last year, we were at the end of Marquez's journey with Honda, and we all had an expectation that he would jump on the bike and the Ducati and be quick, but we didn't really know, and it was a big jump into the unknown. It's easy now for people to look at it and go, well, obviously everything was going to work out, but it really was a thing of, if it didn't work out, Marquez had nowhere to run, because it wasn't just a case of the Honda wasn't bad. It was a case of clearly he's not the rider he was before the injury. And, it's there is a lot of confidence to be taken for it. He has said that, he said on Thursday here in Barcelona that Gresini allowed him to just sort of rediscover his passion for motorcycles. He described them as a Moto2 team. It's like being in a Moto2 team, because you can directly deal with the bosses. You can directly deal with all these people. There's a much more... And I think he really needed that this year to get... If this year was about focusing on himself and focusing on bringing back his enjoyment and just figuring out if he could be competitive again, you don't need, 4 or 5 different team managers to get through it. But you need that close-knit thing. And I think with a crew helmed by Frankie Carcetti, whom Marquez kind of credited for his turnaround in the Grand Prix today, I think that's really been what he's needed. And you could just see he's just much happier speaking to us. When Thursday there was a big scrum around him, and 2 people wanted to ask a question. They were told by the press officer Christian one question, and Mark's like, just one each, it's final one of the year. And that wouldn't happen a few years ago at Honda. I think it's allowed Marquez to relax, to enjoy things. He clearly enjoys life more. He's loved his team. He's clearly in a very, very happy relationship with his girlfriend. He appears a lot closer to his brother Alex as well. They've always had a close relationship, but being teammates and being, I think he's just...
That's it. Yeah.
I think we've kind of got the old Mark back, but he's in a much more mature form, if that makes sense. We've got the speed there, but we've got someone with a lot more wisdom about him, and he's going to go into Tuesday's test on the factory bike, and he's not going to go in there with any expectations. He knows what he's going to be looking for, and then we'll see. But I think it's going to be a much more relaxed winter for him than perhaps it was, last year.
Yeah, it's a really good point, isn't it, that Lewis makes, Pete, because last winter he has the Ducati for one day at Valencia, and he's like, well, I was quick on it, but I still have doubts. And he kept always saying that I'm not sure until he just said he would know. He says that maybe looking back now that he was all going to be okay after he'd done his first run on the Ducati, but he's played it down a lot this year. He has to keep thinking about, how can I return to a level that won't be like 2019. We'll never maybe see that again from him, but how can I know that I'll be quick again. And I think this year's really shown that, as Lewis said, the environment that's created has made him free, essentially, from the factory pressure. He's been able to enjoy himself, and it's like after all those years of the injury and the recovery, and it's like just what he needed. It wasn't really about winning the world title, was it? It was all about just being happy and quick and enjoy life again, essentially, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. All the signs are that that's what it's about for him now, and yeah, he's where he wanted to be. I think also if we compare, if you like, the Marquez of now, we're saying he maybe isn't as explosive, fast as he was in the past. If we're looking at we're talking about Martin winning the championship on consistency. Well, you can see Marc doing very much that kind of season next year, can't you? If we look ahead, he's probably not going to. You mentioned the stats from the Honda years at the end where he's winning everything, but I think we all agree those years are pretty much behind him. But Martin's shown that actually to win the world championship now, what was it, 3 Grand Prix wins this year?
Yep.
That he had. I mean, Marc won. I think he won 3, didn't he? So there we are. So actually, Marc just needs to raise his consistency a bit. Okay, of course, Pecco's going to come back stronger. We know that, but you can see that he doesn't need a radical change. In moving to the factory team, he just needs to get on with the bike and score sort of a bit higher in every single race, if you like. But that's about it. All the ingredients are there. All the data will be there from the previous years. With Michele Pirro, hasn't he? This weekend he came back and he's been highlighting the difference between the 24 and the 23, pointing out that he didn't realise the difference was as big as it was because when he rode the 23, it was with the 23 tyre.
That's it.
And now suddenly when you put the 24 tyre in the 23 bike, oh, hang on, it's pushing the front a lot. So that's also been interesting because Marc doesn't have that comparison, does he, that the other guys did, and they've been complaining, and Marc's just been, well, I don't know, it doesn't feel good or whatever else, and he hasn't known whether it's him, the bike, whatever. So that's another thing that is going to work in his favour going across to the factory bike next week that is obviously designed around the 24 tyre, and the 25 is, of course, designed with all of this year's data
exactly
from races. So yeah, I think it's all looking good, but let's see how he gels with that new environment and the new team, given everything Lewis has said about how much he's enjoyed that family atmosphere at Gresini. Very different atmosphere at the Factory Ducati team, I think. All business there, of course. So that's the only thing. Let's see how he adapts. But I mean, it's all there on paper for him.
Yeah, it is, and we don't have to really wait that long, Lewis. We'll cover testing now, just a little preview. I have it wrote down here. I think there's 14 or 13 maybe changes across the whole grid, from people going to test rider roles, moving teams to different bikes. It's a real change, isn't it, for Tuesday? You're going to see a lot of different things. It's really quite exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we kind of 2 years in a row now, we've had quite an exciting post-season of, obviously last year everything was about Marc on the Ducati. This year we've got quite a lot of, we've got Marc on a factory Ducati this time, but, Martin on the Aprilia is going to be interesting. Jack Miller on the Yamaha is going to be an interesting one as well. There's lots of changes going on. It's going to be interesting to see the rookies coming up. It's definitely one of the more intriguing tests. I'm not sure how much running we're going to get on Tuesday. It's cold here in Barcelona. It's been cold all weekend. It can be cold in Valencia, and to be fair, the test day last year was bitterly cold. We were stood outside for a good hour and a half, 2 hours before we saw anyone take to the track in that session, and it was certainly a bit longer before we saw Marquez head out on the Ducati. So yeah, it's going to be an odd session, I think, but it will still be interesting, and because all eyes really are going to be on Martin on the Aprilia and Marc on the factory bike. As far as I understand it, he's going to be back-to-back in the GP24 and the GP25 because, of course, Marquez has not done any laps on the GP24, so he needs to kind of get a bit of a reference into terms of what the GP25 improves from the GP24. We've seen riders go from 1 year to and make a 2-year step, and it's quite a tricky thing. I think I think. Who was the last one to the Alex?
Bastianini
did, yeah. And I remember him at the time saying, it's quite a big jump. Actually, I didn't know the other bikes, therefore I haven't got anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
So there'll be a busy day there for Marc, but an intriguing one. And a bit of sort of exclusive information, I guess. I hope it's still exclusive by the time our story on our podcast goes up. But I have had it confirmed that Marc will be in factory colours, but there won't be any branding on the bikes apart from like Michelin, the very standard basic sort of things. The Ducati branding as well, but nothing more. So we should see Marc in some form of factory red on Tuesday, which is definitely going to be an interesting new look for him.
Yeah, it is, and I can't wait. Like you say, that knowing that he's going to give the GP24 a little run, that's a little bit exciting. I think. I know the conditions are. I hope they're a wee bit warmer, but like seeing him on that 24 for one day, maybe just seeing what he can do, that'll be interesting, won't it, Pete? And also, as Lewis says, Jorge Martin changing brands, and like that's it, and like. Will we see a number one? Will he bring that out? It's going to be fun, isn't it? Seeing all the different changes that we have. It feels like it's a new dawn for MotoGP almost, doesn't it?
It does a bit, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah, you're right there. Yeah. And of course, at Aprilia also, Fabiano Stecchini stepping in to take over. It really is a complete sort of change that's going on there. Both riders obviously changed as well. Bezzecchi going over to join Martin. It's going to be interesting to see how Martin's sort of initial feeling is with the bike, because we know he's not somebody that likes to change the bike too much.
It's a good point. Yeah.
So he likes a bike. Once he gets something that he thinks, I understand it, I like it. He doesn't want it to change too much. So is he going to get on this bike and go, yeah, I like this, I understand it, or is he going to be turning the bike upside down and everything else, and then it could be a long winter for him and Aprilia. First impressions, everyone says they're not important, but when we look back, the guys that have jumped onto a different bike and gone fast straight away, it sort of does seem to sort of it's certainly a good sign for the future anyway, isn't it? So there'll be a lot. I think there'll be a lot riding on Tuesday, just to get that first impression is just so important, whether it's not only the lap times, but also just how they feel with their new teams and whether they feel comfortable and everything else in their new environment.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of Valentino Rossi at 2010 or Valencia, first flying laps round. I think he knew on that Ducati that he had made a mistake, and he said that maybe a couple of years later. So yeah, I can't wait. Of course, seeing Enea, Bastianini, Marc Vinales on KTMs, as Lewis mentioned, the Yamahas as well. I believe that Jack Miller had some funny comments, Lewis, from Cal Crutchlow about what he is in for when he rides the Yamaha.
Yeah, I asked Jack, has he been speaking to Cal, because they're very, very good friends, and he's been speaking to Cal about the Yamaha, and he said Cal's not the most reliable person to talk to, because he's very he exaggerates quite a lot, whether it's good or bad, and I mean, Pete can definitely attest to that as well from all the years of Cal debriefs of, I definitely get what when Jack's coming for, but it's a good sort of platform that Jack's got, because he's got a good relationship with Fabio and with Alex Rins, so and we'll be teammates with him now, so he can get that data. He can have those conversations with Cal, so there's quite a good winter coming up, I think, for Jack with this particular transition.
Yeah, there is, and that's really pretty much it from what we can say about today. We've covered everything. We'll cover testing again next week, more in depth for that, and then that's pretty much it for this year. And then we'll just do all the reactions of reviews, and then that tedious thing of talking about what's going to happen in 25 and predictions. But yeah, the last thing I'll say to you, I'll give one word answer. Sum Jorge Martin's season up in one word. Can you think of one? I've got one. I'll say mine.
Go on.
Resilience. I think he's shown that he is resilient from last year, and yeah, he's the champion for a reason. I've been so impressed with his resilience, and especially in adversity as well. I think he's been brilliant.
That's it.
Yeah, I think mine's is along the similar line. I think mature. I think that's the way to look at Martin's championship this year.
Pete? Yeah, it's not but consistent. I think it's a bit of a boring word, really, considering what he's done. But it's got him there. It's got him. He was fixed on this goal for the start of the year, and that's what he's done. And interested to see what's next for him, as we say, because I think he's still very young. Let's see where he goes from here.
Yeah. Congratulations to Jorge Martin for winning the world title. Congratulations to Pramac as well. And yeah, we'll see you next time for our testing review. So if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to like, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe, follow wherever you're getting your podcast from, on Apple, Spotify, wherever that is. You'll never miss an episode. And until next time, we'll see you then.